Flight Plan Quick Consults is sponsored by PI Mid-Atlantic and Joan Marshall. Predictive Index helps veterinary leaders better understand what drives their people so they can hire more thoughtfully, improve communication, build stronger teams, and lead each employee more effectively. Joan is a former human resources executive who used PI within several companies before becoming a PI Mid-Atlantic consultant nearly 25 years ago. To learn how Joan can support your practice, contact her directly at jmarshall at pimidlantic.com. Welcome aboard Flight Plan Quick Consults, the podcast designed to bring busy veterinary leaders practical ideas, fresh perspectives, and actionable takeaways in 25 minutes or less. I'm your host, Brenda Tassava Medina, and today's episode is From Control to Confidence, a better way to lead your team. So let's buckle up for takeoff. Today's guest panelists include practice owner Dr. Amy Tate, practice manager Crystal Hardison, and our very own Carol Hurst. Carol, tell our listeners about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carol Hurst, and my background is a credentialed technician. Went into this wonderful field straight out of high school, and I was in that role for a couple of years before being put into a leadership role, which has its own struggles, as you've probably heard in the past. And I was in a practice manager role for about 12 years in different practices, learning different skills, growing. I've got my CVPM, and I was in that role for a while before joining Brenda with consulting. And now here I am with Encore Vet Group doing what I love.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Carol. Next up is Crystal.
Hey, I'm Crystal. I am a practice manager for two practices with Encore Vet Group, and I started in vet med in 2008. I started in the kennel. I went to school and got my RVT, and then in 2022, I went and got my CVPM. Just naturally evolved through the practice into management and leadership. I'm super passionate about my team and setting them up so they can succeed and thrive.
Well, thanks for being with us today, Crystal.
Thank you.
And rounding things out, Dr. Tate.
Hey, I'm Amy Tate. I'm a veterinarian. I have been a veterinarian for 26 years and a practice owner partner since 2008, right after my daughter was born, and then managing partner in a 7 doctor practice in Birmingham, Alabama since 2021. We have a team of about 40, and this is a topic close to my heart. Because I have done this several times and learned and hopefully continue to develop stronger teams as a result.
Well, thanks for being here, Dr. Tate. As we all know, well, as you know, veterinary practices often promote talented people into leadership, and then they unintentionally teach them that leadership means keeping a close eye on everything. I touched on this a little bit in my last week's episode because I had someone do a Dear Brenda around the technician that they had promoted. But that keeping a close eye on everything, it's oh, you got to check their work. You got to approve the decisions. You got to solve the problems. You got to make sure nobody drops the ball. Um, as a new leader, it can feel like you have more responsibility, but over time, that style of leadership actually creates dependence on the leader versus autonomy. We see team members might stop taking initiative because they learn that the leader's eventually going to step in somehow anyway, and maybe even change what they did. They just put their hands up. I've actually seen this in action many times. I'll have, somebody reach out to me and they're like, I need you to take a look at our workflow efficiency. I'm really struggling. The team doesn't seem to really support me the way that I need them to. And I'll go, and what I'll observe is the team member in a room kind of holding up the wall. They're like leaning on the wall, waiting for that doctor to direct them or tell them what they need from them. And it's like frustration from both sides. Or we see CSRs who default to deferring to their manager rather than solving a client's problem. So many ways you might see this in action. So, Carol, you actually inspired me because we're reading Trust and Inspire by Stephen M.R. Covey, for our book club. And this book challenges leaders to replace the traditional command and control model with something different, which is creating conditions where people can grow, contribute, take ownership, do meaningful work. So I'd really like to dig into what that shift looks like inside of veterinary practice. So, Carol, you might not actually be leading a team right now, but thinking back on your experiences leading teams, have you accidentally in the past trained them to wait for you? And as a practice manager, if you were unexpectedly away from the hospital for 2 weeks, what decisions would grind to a halt or would have ground to a halt because everyone was waiting for you to come back?
Hi, I'm Carol, and I'm a recovering fixer. So, this really, I mean, this topic just relates to me when I was in practice so much because that was a source of pride, right? Being that problem solver, I'm the practice manager. I know my employee manual from start to finish. And Brenda, I absolutely trained my team that if they had a question, if they had a need, they came to me and I could give them a response. Often before they ever even finished their thought, my brain was moving in that problem solving direction. And I think exactly what you mentioned is what happened. And I think it's, when I think back to that question, if I'm gone 2 weeks, what decisions are grinding to a halt? And all of us do it. We come back and, you've got that pile on your desk and you start shifting through, the different things. Client complaints, as you mentioned, was a big one. And I can feel that frustration even now where it's like, oh, it's like a $20, nail trim or whatever that was the miscommunication. And they're waiting on me. They waited a week for me to return before they could solve that client problem. And you only have yourself to blame when you don't put those systems in place that that empower your team to make those decisions for whatever reason, right? Either they don't want to make the wrong decision for compared to what you might make because you've kind of set that standard, or they don't have that empowerment at all, like just the kind of permission to problem solve if it's a client concern that they could potentially handle. So that stood out. Scheduling issues, I think, were another thing that would wait on me. When you think about, okay, y'all can switch a shift. Here's the parameters. Am I holding myself to that standard? If they make those decisions, or am I going back and saying, no, you really should do it this way, or really should do it that way? I think about shift changes and things like that where the communication just wasn't clear enough. So yeah, I mean, I think when you look at how we set things up, I think it can be a point of pride, and we have to challenge that. Because at the end of the day, we have a lot of answers, but we don't have all the answers. And my practice owner, several years into my leadership journey, was like, I want to give you a piece of advice, right? You have a lot of answers and you know a lot of things about the practice. And at the end of the day, just because they don't do it the same way that you would do it doesn't make it wrong, right? Is the end result something that we want? And if so, the path to get there can look different. And that was kind of a light bulb for me. He was a great coach in that respect, for how to kind of rethink things when it came to coaching my team.
Thank you for that, Carol. I too am recovering. Crystal, what are your thoughts on this question, reflecting on yourself as a leader?
It really touches home. Very similar to Carol, especially when I was in like the RVT mode, which for our previous owner was like management leadership. There was responsibilities. It wasn't just technical, but I was that person. Like I was the one that kept everything moving, all the gears turning. And if I was off, they literally would have to adjust the schedule. Like, well, we can't do this. Crystal isn't here. We got to wait until she comes back. And I'll never forget, we partnered with Encore and the first leadership meeting I went to, raising my hand and going, okay, how do I not be that person anymore? How do I set my team up that it still functions whether I'm there or not? And that's kind of been my goal going forward since. And the hospital really should run the same way, whether I'm here or not here. And not just for me, because that is heavy, when there's so much that changes or stops when you're not there, but for the team too. Like, if we're building the team that we want, the dream team, then then I trust them to make the decisions, and they should feel trusted. They should feel empowered. And it takes time to get there, right? You have to have the right team, you have to have the right people, you have to do a lot of coaching, and you have to do a lot of building their confidence. And one of the things is like, okay, what would you do? Okay, that sounds great. Let's do that. And over time, it just then they start doing it. But I think having that trust established so that they know I've got their back, and then they make the decisions, and the gears keep turning whether I'm here or not. One of the things that we can do here is anybody that's like a senior team member that's been here, that's established, like if somebody asks for the manager, well, they don't always need me. Sometimes they just need a different voice. And so if you can't handle it, or if you're to that point where they're frustrated with you, then okay, well, your buddy sitting next to you, they can be the manager on the floor for that moment. They can take the call, they can troubleshoot it, and 98% of the time they resolve it. And then they're like, later they're telling me, oh yeah, this happened, and it's great. And it's a beautiful thing when all the pieces finally do kind of come together.
Yeah, I love what you said because the classic question, what do you think we should do? And I distinctly remember the very first time I used that question when I was really trying as a leader to make that shift, and I used it with my CSR team lead, and she came to my office and she just kind of like vomited all this stuff about this client that was upset and yada yada yada, and I'm listening to her and listening to her, and I stopped myself and I said, well, what do you think we should do? And she stopped and her eyes got big and she was like, well, I think that we should do this and this. And I'm like, great. Then why don't you go and talk to the client? And she looked at me like, wait a minute, and I felt the urge to say, you know, I need you to be the problem solver and so that you are the problem solver in that client's eyes. Because otherwise, the next time they come through the door and they see you, they're going to look for somebody else because you had to go to the manager and have the manager take care of it last time. And by having that conversation, it really made a shift in people's thoughts in terms of, oh, I want to be the problem solver. I want them to appreciate me for what I do. Dr. Tate, what's your take on this and how have you reflected on it?
So I am a recovering, still active fixer. So
We
if
can
there's
all
like a
relate.
fixers, right, a fixers anonymous, I would be at the top of the list. I'll be honest, mine comes a little bit from a different perspective. Mine comes from the ownership perspective of taking over kind of a big practice and some uncertain times, a little bit out of fear. So you start that journey and you want it to be successful because you have a lot personally and emotionally, and sometimes financially vested in the practice. And so, who better to answer all those questions than the person who's kind of got like all of it on the line. But that is only sustainable for a very short period of time. And so once that recognition hit that I was operating from a position of fear and I had made all of these people dependent on whether or not they could answer a simple question. I mean, I think I was on vacation with my family and my phone had overheated and I couldn't respond because it had just been going off all day long. And that was kind of an eye-opening moment. And really, before you kind of allow people to blossom that way, you have to have some kind of operational agreement, some type of operational guidelines, because our team, at least my team, wants to know what to do in these situations. Either they don't have the framework they don't have the conversation ability or guidelines or ability to practice. So they just don't know what to say. And so just recently on, I had a CSR who had a client that wanted refills of medication. We had lapsed in lab work and we had lapsed in physical exams. And she just didn't have the confidence to know what to say. So we we practiced, and I said, now, I mean, I can come up and solve this, but to your reference, Brenda, if she comes back in, she's going to go straight by you because
Yeah.
you didn't have the knowledge to, or the you have the knowledge, you didn't have the confidence to answer her question in that moment and had to come get me. So you guys always get upset that the clients are like, well, just go to ask Dr. Tate. We have set them up for that
Hmm.
over time. So
Absolutely.
some of it was a little self-awareness of where that activity as an owner was coming from. And that was kind of a little bit of a telling moment. Like I created this environment unintentionally, just because of a framework from which I was operational.
Carol, you've got a comment or a question here?
Yeah, so it's so great to hear from a practice owner's perspective on that. And then knowing my role as a practice manager over the years, I took it as a point of pride when my practice owner would go on vacation and I didn't have to reach out to him. And for all the recovering practice owners out there, recovering fixer or current fixer, your practice manager wants to be in that role where they can run things, man. When you're gone, they can run things. They don't have to ask questions, or it's just this very narrow scope of decisions that, man, I have to have that touch point, or all these really important things come to a screeching halt. But I took it as a point of pride, right? Like, oh, I don't have to ask those questions. I don't have to bother them. They can enjoy their vacation because that was, I guess that was my recovering fixer part of it. But it's the other side of the coin, right? Is just being capable and feeling empowered to make those decisions. So that was really, I don't know, that just really hit me because I'm like, yeah, like, your practice manager wants that.
Yeah, yeah. And
Right, for
it's so
sure.
interesting. You said the 2 week vacation. I remember there was a time I wouldn't take a 2 week vacation because I felt like I was gone too long. And I still took calls and text messages and this and that and the other. And I would do payroll while I was gone. And I distinctly remember one of the last vacations I took before I left that particular practice was a 10-day vacation. And I came back and I was like, is everything okay? Nobody called me or texted me, and my leadership team led by, my HR manager, he was like, "Yes, we did it." We intentionally set out to not have to call you. And that just felt so great as a leader that it's like they graduated. It was like they were fully empowered, they felt trusted. And they took it upon themselves to set a goal not to call me when I was on vacation. And it was great. And everyone should have that feeling when they're away from the practice, right?
Right. I think as a practice owner veterinarian, sometimes we get into a trap of it feeds our ego, it feeds our need, it feeds our little brain receptors of wanting to be wanted. Because I do feel a lot of practice owners kind of identify themselves with their practice so much, that not being wanted is kind of like, is something wrong? Are they just not telling me? And so there has to be a little bit of, from the practice owner perspective, a little bit of self-awareness of, where is this kind of desire to be the answer for all the questions coming from,
Yeah.
right? So it took a
So
lot
my
of work. I'll say it took a lot
and
of
I
work,
mean, it's
and it's
something that
still,
we all have to work on,
yeah, it still
and it
takes a
doesn't
lot of
go
work.
away automatically, right?
Yeah, yeah. Still working on, still project, and still under a project. So
So my second question is, how do you trust people without lowering accountability? Carol.
So, you know me, I like to try to create a formula for what I can. And so when I think through this question, at the end of the day is, are we setting our teams up for success with this big scary word called delegation? Because, as much as we preach delegation, it can't just be this blanket, here's a task and here's a task and everybody gets a task, right? We really have to sit down and think through what is our method of setting ourselves and the team up for success so that we can feel really confident with this word called empowerment. And the flip side is, the accountability that we all want. So the questions I ask myself are, is it the right task and the right person, right? So does it fit their strengths? Are they actually capable of accomplishing it? Are you handing it off because it's just something off your plate, or is it truly the right fit? Is it the right timing? Do they have the bandwidth? Are you overloading somebody's plate who may be a good fit for it, but it's just not the right time? Do they have the right resources and skills? And this one is a little tricky because I don't want that to be a hard and firm barrier. I want it to be something that maybe we can let them grow and it's a stretch, kind of a stretch goal for them, but we provide them with those resources and skills. And then one of the most easily missed and maybe important frameworks is expectations. Like, are we actually setting the proper guardrails? Some people need a lot of structure, especially if they haven't done this before, versus those that are a little more veteran, maybe your leads, if you've been working with them on this, may just need the end goal. Like, here's the timeline, here's the end goal. What do you need from me? And then what is our cadence for check-ins? Because I certainly fell into the trap of, here's the end goal, here's the expectations. And then at the end of that, I didn't have the appropriate check-in, and my team members like, oh yeah, I didn't get to that. And I'm like, but it's been 30 days. Like, why didn't you tell me before now? And so I'm like, big doe eyes. And so it's, do you have the check-ins to support that structure and the expectations that we need to work through it if, you're reaching some barriers, and so we don't reach the end of our deadline and just no motion has happened.
I like the check-ins, but I would caution people not to build in too many check-ins, because then your team member feels like, what? Don't they think I can do this? Why do they need
Yeah.
to check in? And it's a definite sign of potential
Yep.
micromanagement. So,
It's
I was gonna
tricky.
say the
yeah.
yeah, the micromanager in me will also come out because you've given up you especially early in the process of delegation, right? Because you're giving this project to someone and you have a little bit of faith that they can do it, but maybe you haven't quite seen it in action. So, your immediate kind of reflex is to be like every couple of days, how's it going? How's it going? Is it progressing? Do you need any help? And sometimes you have to kind of let them flounder a little bit. And that's hard. It can be hard to kind of sit there and go, okay, so why didn't we meet this deadline? What are the prohibitive steps to why we haven't gotten this done? It's important to the practice, it's important to the group, it's important to the team, and we have missed it, or we've missed a number, and walk me through why we didn't get to this point. And that's where that accountability comes in, and it's uncomfortable because nobody wants to say, oh, we missed a goal and we missed a number, we missed an achievement. But there'll have to be a little bit of kind of tripping and failure before you get to that cycle where they're like, oh, wait, they really want this done for this reason. And that accountability it's not personal, but it is part of running and maintaining operations.
Yeah.
Safety and failure is such a can of worms from a,
Yeah.
like, oh, you want it, but how do you get it?
Right.
Next podcast, Brenda.
Right. And kind of going back to books you read, there are, obviously different ways that sits in different age groups, and, managing those types of groups across all age brackets is a little bit more challenging than I realized.
Yeah.
And so kind of learning that dynamic as you get ready to not have to be the fixer all the time, or a recovering fixer. Um, I do think that kind of understanding generational changes um, is helpful.
Yeah, it can help shape our leadership style for sure. Well, let's put a bow on accountability with Crystal's perspective.
No, when I saw this question, I thought of both of those, accountability and a safe place to fail. Setting up clear expectations. I've got two fairly new APMs that we're training, and so this really hits home with what we're going through with both of them. Like this is, clear expectations. This is what we're working towards. This is where we want to get. But it's not going to always be pretty. You're going to make mistakes. We're going to talk about it. We're going to learn from it. But no, letting them know that it's okay that it's not perfect. But the more you do it, the more you experience it, the smoother things get. And that seems to work for us pretty well.
I like that because so often our team members might feel a little bit of paralysis from
Mhm.
fear of failure. And so setting them up for failure is okay. And failures actually can be a good thing because we can learn as long as we pivot quickly when we do
Yep,
fail, right?
definitely.
Well, thank you
Yeah, I mean,
all.
I almost expect that you want them to fail just a little bit in the beginning so that you can show them it's okay. We all, it's happened to
We
all of us,
all
but this is
do. I mean, I
this is how
still
you
do.
recover, right? This is how you build some resilience.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you all for flying with me today on Flight Plan Quick Consults, and a big thank you to Joan Marshall of PI Mid-Atlantic for sponsoring today's episode. I hope something from today's conversation gave you a new idea to consider, a question worth asking, or a next step you can put into action in your own practice. Until next week, keep your mission clear, your team aligned, and your practice soaring.